energy controls everything, right? So if you have access to the resources that provide the energy that you need and that provide the elements that you need to be running your economy, you won't necessarily let anyone come and eat off of that plate, right? So for the media, for the people, you'll display a certain sense of transparency and bringing all these big talks and bring all these big forums. But this is a lot of powder in the eyes. I mean, I'm sorry, I sound very cynical, but unfortunately, yeah, there's no such thing as a free meal. The thing is that it is not as simple as it sounds, right? Because you would, again, and it's normal to assume that because of the wealth we have and because of the natural resources we have, you might think that we can rebel ourselves and sort of like create a shift in the paradigm that we've been dealing with for all these years. And I think to a certain extent it is happening. But quite sincerely, I'm afraid that the world being so globalized now, it is becoming more and more complicated to bring about the kind of disruptive attitude from these leaders that we have now and that we are to have in the future. And so I understand exactly your point, and I feel that way sometimes. We think we have what it takes to be able to change things, and you can see that to a certain extent it's true, but then one of the biggest issues that we have within the African continent is the lack of unity. There's no such thing as African unity. There's no such thing as African unity. It does not exist, at least not in depth. There are unfortunately so many different levels, and everybody is trying to like control the other and be the leader of this region, that region, and then position themselves so that they can be the middle person or or controlling sort of like the middle ground and having a vision on how things are shifting around them, and so being the bridge between foreign forces and their regional neighbors, and so on and so forth. So I think that as Emery Agnon is saying here, there are well-sealed colonial treaties that you can't break right away, even if you want to be free. Exactement. You see that with Cameroon, with so many countries. There are indeed very, very, very tight deals. And the thing is that if you were to, break them off and try to breach contract, should I say, I think that the likeliness of a total disaster would have to be considered. I mean, one way, shape, or form, some of these fuckers out there would be like, you know what, we'll bond you motherfuckers, we don't need you. And I'm exaggerating a little bit maybe, but if you see the value of that is given to our lives, to the lives of our people on the continent, when there is any sort of natural disaster, or if you look at, you don't have to look far, DRC, the eastern part of Congo, what is going on is been going on for so many years. Millions and millions and millions of people have been killed, and yet it checks no one. You see still to this day hundreds of thousands of kids working in mines because there's no other ways to make a living, and being enslaved, and there's so many. And the thing is that there's so many layers socially, socioeconomically connected. It's very, 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 very complicated to bring about the kind of change and the kind of evolution that we who live abroad and who are of the diaspora would love to see our continent be about and bring about. That is why a lot of the time when, for example, you return back, for those who decide to return back to the continent and leave on the continent and establish themselves, there's such a massive shift and distance between their perception and the way things are being perceived on the continent by our fellow sisters and brothers. So much so that it creates almost a disdain from one part towards the other, and vice versa. Um, and I think both have to have empathy for one another, because one has been away and deracinated and derooted, either by choice or by force or whatnot, and the other has had no choice but to stay, on ground and survive and make things happen. And I think that there's got a way to come together and sort of like try to meet each other on a level playing field that's set in a way that doesn't allow anyone to think that they're superior than the other, completing one another's knowledge, completing one another's skill set, and trying to empower one another. And it's like, well, and it is very much the kind of things that could be achieved, but in reality, they're more complicated to do than anything, because our mentality is so deeply ingrained, so profoundly ingrained, that you end up having to fight against something that is almost DNA like. People have grown to be that way. They've grown to, for example, if you look at my country, Central African Republic, there's no sense of tomorrow. There's no concept of let's think about tomorrow. Today is here. It's now. That's what counts. So what I can have, if I can have it today and I'll have it today, then I'll have it today, and that's it. So that's sense of urgency. The sense of lack cannot facilitate contemplation of the future and projection of oneself in the future being something that can be bright or potentially positive on the long run. And yet we are one of the most faithful continent in the entire world. There's no bigger there's no bigger preachers and people of faith than on the African continent. Unfortunately, we know that it's all farces. These are unfortunately ways, and I'm not disrespecting anyone's belief. You see, the problem that I have is that all of these belief system religions have set things up in a way that it's like we must believe that for us to be poor here is okay because we will be rich when we die in paradise, forgetting that the paradise is here. I mean, we are living here. We must either we make this life hell or heaven is of our own choice. That doesn't mean that being rich will make your life heaven, because I know quite a few rich people who are freaking miserable. However, I am planning to do my best to live this life. I live the fullest and giving myself the capacities and the tools and the means to enjoy, at least, because it cannot just be about suffering. So there's a normalization of suffering, and there's a normalization of us, of African people, having to suffer, right? It's like, it's okay. And again, this traces back to the lack of knowledge of self and the knowledge of history, because we are not taught about, the origins of humanity. And yeah, I know a lot of people, they say, oh, I'm amazing at this history and geography, this and that and the other. Yeah, okay, but you're amazing at knowing and repeating a knowledge that has been organized systemically and systematically in a way that always portrays any other race than the white race, or anyone of the white race, as being superior than the other. And unfortunately, you see that a lot of the time. You continue to see that, even though it may not. Okay, they're trying to change a little bit of the curriculum, etc., etc. But unfortunately, it's always the perspective of, well, the white. If a white person comes and say, well, this is for example, I opened the show talking about Sheikh Anta Diop. And before I continue, let me pull up some of the comments here by Preston John. For example, DRC leadership bypassed local Congolese mining corporations in favor of Chinese companies. 80% of Congo's cobalt goes to China. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Them, and I believe Zambia also signed off quite a lot of their natural resource mining resources to the US when they did this USA Africa summit. It was, I think, last month or last year. I can't remember. But yeah, so, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Erica, again, other countries have broken such treaties like Argentina, and though the consequences are inevitable, if the shift doesn't happen, there will never be change. I agree with you. But you see, I don't know much about Argentina, so I'm not going to make an educated comment about the structural and the system of Argentina's government and political system. But I would assume that Argentina is mostly dominated by white people. So whether you are Latinos, etc., but there's still a sense of colorism going on, where people who are of a lighter skin, who are white, will still be it for them to break the treaty. Okay, they'll endure a couple of like messed up things. There's gonna be a couple of embargoes here and there, or a couple of scandals, Panama Papers, whatever. But the truth is that it's part of the same crew. Does it mean that people suffer less? No, but I highly doubt that if a country like DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, was to breach any agreement dating back to the colonial times or to recent days, you would see this country be brought to complete annihilation, and they would find ways to make it happen. I mean, you were talking about a land that is so vast, you can put half or the entire of Europe. I can't remember the because people underestimate the size of Africa. Africa is a massive continent. It is much bigger than it is portrayed on the map, on the Mapa Mundo. That's the thing that people don't understand. You can literally put, I can't remember if it was Europe or half of Europe, it can enter inside the Democratic Republic of Congo. This land is so rich that if they try to just breach or do anything that is against the interest of the Americans per se, well, they can try. But this is when you're going to realize that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were just a test. I obviously, I speak, well, kids say I speak out of my ass and I don't know nothing. And that's not to say that what happened in Japan during World War II was nothing. It was horrible. As a matter of fact, this echoes to my point. There's no more belligerent countries and aggressive countries than the US. Because they want to because they want to preserve peace and impose peace according to their standards. And the moment you don't fall in line, they start messing you up. And that's the issue. So, and that's not just the US. Now, of course, you see France being expelled out of Mali. But as you can clearly see, Mali is opening their doors to Russia. And it's almost like Russia is giving them a little bit of how we call it in French, blanc-seing. It's like the member. Well, we got the Russian member card, so you can't really fuck with this. But the thing is that you're trading one master for another. And yes, okay, cool. I agree that you had to do what you had to do in order for things to change. But then the problem is that, is it really going to be a partnership? Is it really be going to be a win-win situation between you and the Russians? Because you know, this is questionable. It really is questionable. And in the late 80s, there was a forum that took place in the US. Oh, look, let me see if I can find this in my stuff here. Oh, Lord have mercy. Excuse me. Give me a second while I'm looking for this. Welcome everyone. As I'm looking at this, Papa Kesha, Master Electronic Nakaza. That's right, Pastor John again. Welcome everyone. Vraiment, la milliardaire. Merci beaucoup. Bravo pour les efforts faits. C'est ça. C'est comme ça qu'on apprend les langues étrangères. Master Electronic, we need to remember about whom drawn our maps, constitutions, and way of living. Indeed, sir. Indeed. All right, Erica, there will always be risks involved, but self-determination must always be part of the foundation we operate on. I agree. But self-determination has and can only take place if you have an identity and a sense of identity. And you can identify, how can you identify if your culture is being overlooked and downplayed, and there's so many things that are really causing for us to lack all of the pride that we need to be having in order to start even thinking about changing paradigm. The religious ideals you bring up are so important to talk about. You're teaching on very important. Well, I'm not teaching, my sister. I'm trying to just share some of my personal views. But I mean, if it enlightens you, I invite you to definitely go and do your own research and expand your knowledge. It's all of us. We have the duty of doing that. Exactly, it's definitely a huge factor indeed. The size of the continent is a huge factor. Master Electronic, you're right. We are people without source codes. Indeed. That's right. Papa Keisha, as long as you don't build your weapons and real army, you will be somebody's little. Exactly, that's exactly what I was saying. We don't have an industry. We don't have industry. We don't have industry. Can you believe that a country like Central African Republic, let me go back to that forum I was talking about. Can you believe that Central African Republic doesn't produce matches, matches to light candles or anything? We don't produce that. We used to have a sugar company, Sojeska. We used to have we used to have so many things, and it's like, and all of this has gone to limbo, complete and absolute utter limbo. So you've got to, this really begs the question. It's like, not only do we mess each other up willfully, but we indulge in it. So this forum, there was many forums that back in the late 80s, you had Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan, Dr. George Simmons, Professor John Henry Clark. Those are some of the most remarkable scholars on the topic of African anthropology, African cosmogenesis, Egyptology, etc. You have to really start looking deeper and deeper. And when you listen to them back in the days, we're talking about late 80s, 85, 87, etc. You see, Tole Kabaneko, comprenez l'émotion. Papa Kesha, le sponsor des sponsors, toujours à l'appel. Aïe, tokos. you will see that um, back in the days, in the late 80s, these scholars were already warning the African nations of the risk to become recolonized. And this will be something that would happen through the mask or the presentation of a more and a fairer way of dealing with the colonizers, the Chinese, the French, the Americans, the Russians, etc., 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 etc. And of course, the colonization is not what it used to be. You know, they're not keeping people in shackles and well, and even that, when you see some of the videos of how some Chinese are handling our sisters and brothers back home on some of the mines that they're exploiting, yeah, I mean, people are still being treated as animals. And the truth is that I firmly believe that had I not received, or had we not received the education we have, we all have received different forms of educations, but at least we know how to read, count, etc. So we have a sense of self that is based on acknowledgement of culture. We have had access to certain resources that facilitated the development of our intellectual intelligence, so much so that, and in such a way that we are capable of discerning the between the fact that we are not to be victim of the oppressor, but we should also not become the oppressor, and at the same time that we are not also a victim of a situation we found ourselves in, or we may have been birthed into, or yet again we are capable of surpassing our condition. That's the thing. A lot of our fellow African sisters and brothers back on the continent, in different areas of the continent, of course, we're talking about 54 countries here, and there's different layers. Again, I spoke before. I remember I had Keisha on the show. We talked about castes. We have a casting system in Africa, whether we like it or not, it is there. Tribalism is an absolute abomination, I would say, because it's problematic to the point where it's leading people to forget that there's good in each of us. Like, just because, like, for example, in my country, Central African Republic, for a long time, people said that the Yakoma people were thinking of themselves as better than the rest. But maybe some, yeah, sure. But just like you have people in my tribe, in the Baya people, who think that they are better than the rest, you're always going to have an elite or a wannabe elite, etc., who thinks that they are more educated, who might even be more educated. But the fact of the matter is that this is something that is tracing back to immemorial times, where there's always going to be people who prefer to maintain a certain portion of those they command and those they lead or they dominate, maintain them in a healthy level of darkness, right? And the problem is that when you have uneducated or hardly educated people who start being enlightened about their condition, then you have this thing where it becomes a senseless revolution, and people, obviously, and us, we have no problem. Like, as much as we are very peaceful, we can flip from 0 to 100 real quick and resort to machetes and slaughtering each other like there's no tomorrow. Whether we accept it or not, by saying that, somebody said, "Oh, are you treating us as savage?" I'm not saying, I didn't say that we are savages, but we can resort very easily to the type of violences that may make us look as if we were even beyond savages, inhumane. You see, I'm going to read some more of your comments here. Sister Erica here. Brother Bodhi, don't apologize for not being an expert. You've created a space to talk about much needed, important topics in Africa. Bless you, brother. Thank you. Thank you very much. Papa Kesha, we are Wakanda without the Black Panther, but we share Disney's version. Indeed, indeed. And if you think about it, even the Black Panthers that we have, we kill them because we don't have one Black Panther. We have so many women and men who have given and sacrificed their lives to not even sometimes do anything more uh, as crazy for actually giving their life for things as crazy as just educating people or just giving access to knowledge that would empower a certain portion of the population that they happen to be in touch with, right? Sister Erica here. So, is building a military force part of the solution? War is business. Do we want Africa to engage this way globally? Of course. You have to have a sense of, you have to understand sovereignty cannot be gained through just wishful thinking and we love you and some kumbaya shit. It's all about industrial military complex. I'm not saying it's good, but it's the fact, the world we live in. And as a matter of fact, if you look back in the days, Roman Empire, Greeks, it's Greek, all of these antiquities, these antique times, all these times were paved by revolutions, wars, conflicts that often resulted in one being the winner over the other and conquering and controlling and becoming a force that eventually, because you dominate, because you are there, you've established your 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 power and exert it in a way that is so visible and clear that nobody dares to challenge you, and anyone who does try to challenge you will be dealing with the consequences of your disobedience. That's exactly how the Americans treat people nowadays. That's why they're the strongest, so-called the strongest or the most powerful country in the world, because of the military and because of the fact that they do have indeed one of the tactically and strategically strongest army in the world. Say what you want, but it is true. This is the one of the countries that can send, several platoons and weaponry at the same time in different places in multiple destinations. So I'm not saying that Africa should be prone to war, but the thing is that if we want to free ourselves the way you say we should, the way Argentina did and IT should, etc., because IT is still dealing with it. Uh, there's a very interesting fate that connects Africa and IT. It's very, very interesting, and they will never allow it. They will never allow this industrialization, this militarization of our systems. It's not going to happen. You know, industry, industry. If you don't have it, you don't have you have nothing. You know, that's the thing. I'll give you a very simple example. I used to be a diamond cutter. The only places in Africa where you can actually cut diamonds properly and actually supposedly be validated and be considered of trust is South Africa. That's it. There may be some diamond cutting firms, I don't know. There used to be one in Central African Republic, but it wasn't that amazing. Because again, one of the big issue that we have is the fact that we lack consistency. So it's going to work for as long as, and unfortunately, that's true. Somebody, whether it's a brother or sister from the diaspora, who has a certain sense of rigorousness and really looks into the quality of delivery, etc., etc., that's going to be sort of like controlling the way the teams deliver and work. And the moment, unfortunately, we don't have that, because, and I'll explain why this mentality is in place according to my perspective. The moment that person is no longer in position, and you start, okay, surrendering the control of the production to the people you once were managing, well, quickly you'll start to see that the authority is not the same, or even if the person has the best intentions and really is of absolute trustability, the people that are to be managed by this person will start acting the hell up, even when you manage and you control things and you impose a certain system. You're still gonna have to come back and explain to people, okay, this repeat the same thing over and over. Problematic caused by the fact that at the root, at the inception, these very people that you're trying to train, their matrix, they didn't have access to the amount of again, knowledge, culture, and education that would allow them to build critical analysis, allowing, because they have a critical analysis, but it's based on the program of survival.